Michael, Neff, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. We are looking forward to, I know the RMFW folks are looking forward to having you at Colorado Gold in September. And boy, I think we have so much to dive into. You come at the writing business from so many angles and perspectives. I mean, I started reading your bio and it just, from creator to publisher to editor to agent to conference organizer, et cetera. Is empire okay to say you've got an empire?
No, I wouldn't go that far.
Okay. Well, I'm
More
wondering,
like a province.
A province, okay. I'm wondering if you could just start us off by telling us when did you know, at what age did you know that that this book and fiction world, nonfiction world, that publishing, writing, when did you know that this was going to be your thing? How long has this been around?
Well, good question. I mean, I've been writing since high school. I was the editor of the school literary journal and wrote a lot of poetry, most of which was meaningful but pretty bad as I look back on it, because it depends on your taste, I guess. And it was going into my early 20s that I was in a bookstore one day and reading a really bad science fiction novel. I won't name the author, but I thought, boy, if this person can get published writing this, at least I've got a chance. And that kind of ignited me at the time. And so, of course, I was deluded in every way, running on equal amounts of false optimism and ignorance. I had no idea the task before me. And so if I had, I might never have started trying to write a novel, because I had no idea how much time and effort and knowledge and willpower and humility it would take. No idea whatsoever. But nevertheless, I persevered. And interweaving with that time and going forward into the very early internet age in the mid 90s, I was working at that time to make the mortgage and put food on the table for the federal government in Washington, D.C. I started with the Carter administration, and then from there into Reagan for a while. So for a total of about 4 years. And then I had a hiatus and I came back during Bush Senior, and I was there for all of Clinton and part of W. Wow. But in the very beginning, when I was still in the early days of the Reagan administration, of course, and no one knew anything about internet. And a couple of the geeks where I worked at an agency downtown, they just started this thing called internet. Oh, well, I mean, they had linked into internet, and they gave me a test run one time, and I said, you got to get a T3 or T1 line up to my office and hook my computer up. They owe me a few favors anyway. Anyway, to make a long story short, it got me interested in all things internet and on the concept of putting up literary magazines on the internet. I was the second person to ever put a literary journal on the internet.
Wow.
Frederick Barthelme at University of Mississippi was the first to put Mississippi Review on, and I was the second to put the literary review out of Madison, out of Fairleigh Dickinson University, and then proceeded from there.
What year was that?
That was it was late 95.
Yeah, boy, early days. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the internet, there was a lot of hostility against internet, misunderstanding. But there were a few visionaries around who could see the promise in that, of putting something online that people from all over the world could see it till the end of time, hypothetically. A good friend of mine named Bill Slaughter, who came a little bit later, the next year, put on the first all poetry journal online called Mudlark. And his motto is never in, never out of print. So that's how I got started into doing journals online. I started writing more short fiction and more poetry, and became over the years far more adept at that, and got quite a few things. I mean, over time, published in some of my favorite journals at the time, including North America Review. That was one of the big highlights of my writer life, was to get anything published in North America Review at that time, and then it kind of moved on from there.
What did you get published?
Oh, a couple of kind of like flash fiction type of things.
Yeah.
The original, the editor that time was Robley Wilson, who has since long since moved on and turned it over to the grad students.
So you had a job in the government.
Mm-hmm.
This was just a passion of yours at that point, but were you just sort of a side, was it a hobby? Was it something where you knew in your heart that ultimately, if you could shift all your energy into the world that you've built today?
Oh, absolutely. Just exactly the way you put it. I knew that I could shift all my energy into literary journals online and other kinds of literary adventures online, plus my own writing and so forth. But that wasn't paying the rent. So, and Uncle Sam did pay the rent at the time. So I had to stick with that, regardless of how preposterous federal government could be.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I was totally devoted to doing it, and I ran a website at the time, kind of an umbrella site called Web del Sol, which was an umbrella site for the Literary Review and quite a few other journals at the time, and some other kind of hybrid offshoot things. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot out of it, and also as a bonus, I learned to code all my own web pages, which I still do to this day.
Wow. Yeah. And quite a few web pages are involved in your world once you start poking around in Michael Neff land. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So you really started off with writing, creating, and publishing really simultaneously, just moving in that direction. Sounds like to me.
Yes, sir. That's true.
Yeah. And then when did the whole notion of Algonkian conferences, was that next? We'll get into what.
Yes, it was, and it was kind of a unique fall of dominoes that led to that. I'll put it this way, I retired from the government, I'd say shortly after the turn of the century, and while W was still president, I'd finally had enough. I'd reached my wit's end in every way you can imagine, and I was doing consulting and for websites, for other people that wanted websites, because I developed a lot of skills in that area, and I was cobbling together my own kind of e-business at the time, and writing, and still doing the free kind of nonprofit stuff for journals. And I decided, since I've been working so much with short fiction and editing short fiction, which I recommend to every writer out there to, at some point in their writing life, to be an editor, be like a submissions editor for a magazine or someone. Even if you don't get paid anything, it's worth it for the experience, totally.
Yep.
But I decided was writing a lot of short fiction at the time, getting some of it published. And I thought, what the heck, why couldn't I do a little workshop in the DC area? And I ran some ads in some local papers and got some local writers. And then one day I was out at Algonkian Park in Virginia, and it was just the ideal location for doing kind of a bigger event. They have these like really nice cottages right on the river, and it was very scenic and quiet and special. And I decided to, why not try to hold some workshops out there. And that's where the Algonkian business started, was at that park. And it just kind of expanded from there until doing the workshop business became my total source of income, and my the thing that I was, other than writing itself, most devoted to. And that finally led to the pitch conference in New York. I wanted to go to New York and start a kind of a unique event and expand what Algonkian is doing. In case anyone out there is wondering the difference between the spelling Algonkian and Algonquin, both spellings are valid, and they both refer to the ultimately back in time to the very same tribe.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. But in this case, it was born in a park along the Potomac River, if I read that down right. So that's cool. I take that name and you take the birthplace as your moniker. And
yeah, it just made sense. I mean, it became Algonkian, writer workshop, and it just kind of stuck.
And you have also established a very, I've been around writing conferences and pitch sessions for a long time, but you have established a brand which really has a different flavor to it than many of the other opportunities that are out there. And I'll let you articulate the differences, but it's very thoughtful to me and very grounded and calm. It sounds calm and rational to me.
Thanks. That's me, calm and rational.
Yeah. So describe for folks who don't know, it's really a process you've got, I guess I would say.
Would you like me to address kind of what's different about it?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to do that's different, to my knowledge, from most other writer conferences or workshops or that kind of thing, is that I don't believe in giving handouts to people at the conferences, the workshops, because I find that time wasting. What I do instead is provide an appropriately copious amount of guideposts in novel development and craft development to the writer before they arrive at the conference. And it's very organized and methodical. It's engaging and it is challenging, and not everyone can get through all of it depending on the time they have, and I don't blame them for that. But they many of them getting this material ahead of time can improve. The idea is that they take this material and apply it to their work in progress and learn something and improve it as much as they can on a variety of levels before they even get to the workshop. So when they get there the first day, the idea is they hit the deck running, as opposed to arriving and then getting the handouts and talking about it. Again, I find it far more productive to do it this way. And at the same time, we have a fully developed 16-part novel writing program that's now available at no extra charge to everyone who attends an Algonkian event, so they can use it for any kind of edits, tweaks that they are polished they need to do the novel. They can use this to methodically reality check stage by stage what they're doing in their novel. To the idea being to not only get it done more quickly and efficiently, but to avoid the kind of disastrous mistakes that can set writers back many months, if not years. So that's one of that. I'd say that's one of the core things that makes us different, are the pre-event and the post-event work, which is extensive. As a matter of fact, for the New York pitch, a lot of this is now summarized in an actual pre-New York pitch Kindle booklet of about 150 pages. It actually just became more or less polished and live like a week ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I thought that was a good idea to do that, to provide writers with one single source that they could download for 99 cents. It's not, the idea is not to make money on it, but
Right.
just to help the writers. That's one of the key things. Another thing is, and a lot of people, understandably, and I get it, balk at this. We emphasize that the grand bulk of advice and guidance that anyone gets at any of our events are from professionals only, not from the other amateur writers in the room. And God bless them all. I know that, and everybody is well intentioned, but my analogy is, if you decided that you wanted to design and build your own home and you'd never done it before,
Yeah.
would you sit around in a room taking critical advice on how to do that from other people who've never done it before either, and who knew as little about it or even less than you did? Of course not. You would be insane to do that, because the house would collapse and kill you, even if you were imagine to get a single wall up. A novel's not going to collapse and kill you, but you're in effect doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I know that from my own experience in writing and editing over many years, that creating a successful novel, whether it's literary or commercial, regardless of what the genre is, requires the same or more decision-making points than designing and building a home. It's that you're an author. It's incredibly, there's lots of nuances and lots of ways to go wrong in it, at every step. So why should people pay to come to one of our events to have, Joe or Jane sitting next to them tell them that oh, that's a great title, when it's awful, when it's an awful title?
Yeah.
So then we want, which happens a lot. So we head that off at the pass. I'd say that's one of the second core things that makes us different. And there's a couple others, but not to belabor the point, that the third one, I think, is one of the major ones, is what I call our overall pedagogical method, which I refer to as model and context, which means that we spend a lot of time before and during the workshop examining the great works of very good fiction authors gone before us, classics, semi-classics, recent novels, as appropriate, and we examine the ways that they used craft and technique to create superior stories and narrative. And that way, the writer develops a kind of a repertoire, if you will, of technique and craft that they can apply as appropriate to their story, in the context of their story and progress. Therefore, model and context. That's where that comes from. So that way, myself or other instructors at these events, we're just the messengers. We're saying, hey, look at all these you're standing on the shoulders of all these great authors. They've led the way for you. They've lit the way. Learn what they did and use it on your own. You're not reinventing the novel. Okay.
Right.
It's already been invented.
Yeah.
Use the tools that are before you. And also, and again, in that way, it's just not us, pulling something out of our butts or being arbitrary or some kind of Bennington or Iowa-like fixation on hating italics or, one of those kinds of things. It's nothing like that.
Give folks an idea how big the conferences are, the pitch sessions. I mean, how many days they run, how many editors you bring in, what is the ratio between up and coming writer and expert editor on hand?
Okay, good question. And this goes back to your previous question. What makes this a little bit different? Our larger events, the flagship events in New York, regardless of how many people attend, we break everyone up into smaller workshops, and they usually range between, I'd say, 14 to 16 people on an average, which is doable. I've found once you get 17 or over, it starts to get a little bit unmanageable, only from the standpoint that you don't have the time. You can't find the time that you need to work individually with everyone there, which you need to do. So everyone breaks into groups, and each group is led by a professional in the business who usually has a wide variety skill set with them. I mean, we liked our workshop leaders to be not only authors, but also have been in the publishing business, agenting business, been successful teachers on a number of levels for many years, so that the purpose of that is that writers, when they come in, just don't get kind of a stovepipe view of writing and publishing. They get a wider spectrum viewpoint on everything. So there's that. As far as the other faculty go, we typically invite, aside from the professionals that workshop leaders, who quite often are agents themselves, and many of whom have signed quite a few people and gotten them published from the pitch conference over the years. We have quite a number of faculty that from the New York publishing business itself. And over the past couple of years, we've been transitioning more towards former acquisition editors who have left the business and are now quite successful agents in the business. So for our writers, they bring to the table the experience of having worked in a publishing house and the network that accompanies that experience. And they also now have even more reach and more ability to help get writers published as literary agents. So anytime one of our ex-acquisition editors that we work with becomes an agent, we snatch them up as soon as possible and put them to work at the pitch conference. And also, I'm trying to get more television and film people involved too. I'm still trying to get anyone connected to Netflix at the conference. I'm hoping that going into late 2022 and 2023, we'll have some more people from the television industry. Also, a wider variety of people that our writers can pitch to and maybe get something productive out of.
There's a fair amount of hunger for content, you would think, from that.
Oh my God, there is. But you know, Mark, it's like anything else. You kind of got to be in that circle.
Yeah.
Find your way into that circle, and it's hard to kind of break in.
Yeah. So just on the pitch sessions, it's called New York Pitch Sessions, right? New York.
Well, it's called the New York Right to Pitch 2022.
Okay. And then there's another West Coast one as well.
We used to have a large event out west called the Right to Market, which was near San Francisco. We're no longer doing that, but we have smaller workshops and retreats out west. One at Monterey, for example, which is a great foodie town, by the way, Mark.
Yeah, and some decent views, I believe. Yeah.
Oh yeah, decent views.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, great, wonderful place for a retreat.
Yeah, but in general, one of the things a lot of up and coming writers sign up for a conference, and they go to the workshops, and they go to the banquets, and they go to this and that. But they also have like these little tiny 5-minute pitch sessions or pitch windows where they're signing up for 3 or 4 different pitches all weekend. And there's so much tension and anxiety around that pitch experience. That's their one big chance to,
Yeah.
snag.
Well, see, we don't quite do it that way.
Right.
We don't.
You build relationships. It sounds like you are all
Yes.
in the same room working together.
Precisely, and your workshop leader is your guide and your coach during this whole thing, so that they're present with you when you're talking to the professionals in the room. The idea is to get the pitch down to about 1 minute. That's all it needs to be, and then productively spend the next 5 to 10 minutes doing some Q&A with the faculty, which is more often than not more productive than just the pitch itself. The pitch is like a springboard to get into the novel and talk about it.
Yeah, nice. So why would you, given all that you've got going, what are you looking for when you come out to Colorado Gold? What are you're suddenly putting on a kind of a different hat, or maybe you aren't.
Right. Well, no, I'm putting on a different hat. Sure. The event was, I knew about the event and its quality. I in the past, I've been to plenty of other writer conferences for one reason or another. But Amy Collins, who's a fantastic up and coming agent over at Talcott Notch, who I've met through other contacts and who has actually been at the pitch conference a couple times and signed some people. I think she's got 1 or 2 contracts coming on the way for science fiction and fantasy writers. But she said she was going to the Rocky Mountain thing, and she praised it and said, well, would you like to go? And I thought about it. And yeah, why the heck not? And I looked it over, and it looked like a very professional event, something that maybe I could do some good at, or get thrown out of. One or the other.
Yeah.
I do tend to ruffle feathers now and then, but there's always a good point behind it. So Joe, one thing just kind of led to another, and I like that area, and I thought it would be something that would benefit me, benefit the group over there, and I thought, why not? Sure.
Yeah. So will you be taking pitches yourself?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. And also perhaps talking up the possibility of attending your
Well, I don't want to do. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to use their time to pitch my events. I don't think that would be ethical. Technically, I'm still an agent at AEI Story Merchant in LA, and every now and then I hear something that I think that they might be interested in. They do books and television and films, and I'll flip a card and recommend. But usually at most conferences, what I wind up doing is the individual can pitch something that's understandable, and quite often that's not the case. Then I usually say to them, well, why don't you do A, B, C, D, and E, and then send me a query letter with this, the first 50 pages.
Yeah.
As opposed to just flipping the card and saying, yes, send me the manuscript. Right.
So, general question for you: what do you see happening right now in the market place, and what's your counsel? I know there's some basic rules about writing novels and how they're structured, and we can talk about that, but there's also the moment right now, what's selling and what's not. What do you tell up and coming writers who might have a few different options of things they want to write? Or
sure.
What's your right now?
Well, as you probably know, in the writer workshop editorial business side of things, there's always for every writer, there's a tug between what their artistic integrity and expression demands versus what a particular market is willing to accept. And the quote unquote successful writers are able to walk the line between those two things and make and make the kind of compromises that they need to. And some, the smart ones are, as our Algonkian motto is, from the heart but smart. The smart ones are able to make those choices in a way that benefits them. And to be clear, in quite often in workshops, I'll meet really good writers who they're 99% there. And they could be published one day. They've got a fairly good high concept project. Their prose really snaps and crackles off the page. And yet they're doing one thing in that story, or holding on to one favorite character or one favorite scene that's just going to sink the book. And you tell them and they're not willing to make that compromise. And sure enough, they don't get published. So I totally understand where they're coming from, because my first novel, called All the Dark We Will Not See, which was a kind of a literary political novel, I was told that, well, you bet, because I was writing it during the Bush years, and I was told, well, you got to move up to the Bush years. You're writing a Reagan. Who cares about Reagan? I said, but this is actually a slice of historical history, not considered historical history as such by historical history editors of the business, because it was in the 80s, but still, it was history, and it was something that the book was based on something specific, kind of evil process, if you will, and I mean that in every way, that took place in the early 80s going into 1984. And my part of my point of the novel that worked its way into marketing was that Orwell's 1984 did happen. It happened in Washington when Reagan was president. You just missed it, but it was there. So I couldn't move it up to the W years, and I couldn't take that advice. It just wasn't going to work. So I get it. I get why why artistic integrity and vision can rightfully and dutifully get in the way of writing a manuscript that will meet the current needs of commercial publishers. Then again, on the other hand, there's lots of writers out there who they just don't need to die on that hill. They don't need to. And quite often what they can correct that would get them over the top is not a life and death thing. It's not something that is going to destroy the whole point of the novel if they take out that scene on page 28 where a flashback of the main character is a 12-year-old getting cookies from her mother from 5 pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, and the point is, if you're not yet published, why not get published? Do everything you can to make that a possibility, sure. And then you've got an artistic point to make.
Absolutely.
Come back later. Get
just what you're saying, and I make that point of like be pragmatic. Get your foot in the door. Yeah. And I'll often say, just use the Emile Zola approach. Write your pot boilers over here that are going to get published, and take your serious literary stuff and get that published somewhere else. Go on a dual track if you need to. But if you want to be commercially published, you have to take responsibility and not expect the publishing world to cave in and meet your demands. That's just not going to happen.
Yep. Speaking of which, what do you see happening with publishing today? What kinds of shifts and trends are happening? Are they healthy? Are we going in the right direction? Are things improving? There's so much out there. There's so much content coming out all the time from the big publishers, from independent publishers, and now, of course, independent publishers, people who start their own companies and actually do a really good job of editing and getting their sure. books together, and they do a knockout job with the artwork and the formatting, everything. It looks every bit as good as a But what would you take?
Thanks to print on demand,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which, as you know, was scorned in the early years.
It was black sheep
Oh
territory.
yeah.
Vanity
Oh,
Press was completely shunned.
mm-hmm.
And if you went that way, you could never come back.
Very true. And that
Yeah.
was just pure ignorance. It was wrong. And it was, POD was one of the best things that ever happened to American small presses.
Yeah. What's your, just assessment of the industry today? Are we in a healthy stretch? Are we overthinking things, or
Overthinking things.
I don't know.
Depends on where you are in social media, Mark.
Yeah.
That's, well, as you know, those are pretty broad brush questions, and I hesitate to give broad brush answers to them. I think and I'm not trying to dodge anything. I think that the answers to those questions really depends on the genre. And it depends on, are you talking about New York? Are you talking about Amazon? Are you talking about, the smaller presses and mid-sized presses? They all have their, kind of own cultures and agendas. I know that overall, because of last I heard, the last statistics I heard, that overall, the more people, because of ebooks, more people than ever are reading books, and that's good for everyone. As far as publishing, Major League Publishing itself goes in New York, I really believe that, and this has a ripple effect on everything. I really believe that publishers gotta pay editors a lot more money. I think editors are way underpaid, and it's one of the factors that creates a lot of high turnover in the business. I've seen a higher turnover in the business because what I learned when I go to New York 4 times a year, and of course meet a lot of people and talk to a lot of people, and we'll have say several people on our masthead that we had just signed to our faculty, say 1 or 2 years ago, and they're gone already. They're
Wow.
out. And you hear, and I'm not going to mention any names, but you wind up hearing the same stories. Really low pay, totally overworked, lots of hassles, internal hassles, social media hassles, on and on and on, whatever those consist of. So what you get is a business with a lot of high turnover and a lot of really young gatekeepers with at the bottom of the pyramid. Well, I say far more than you had back in the 70s and 80s, where you had more of a more better proportioned pyramid of mid-level and senior level editors and managers, and dare I say, some less influence from marketing. And I think in a lot of ways, a lot better decisions were because of that structure back then, and better pay relative to what the cost of living was at that time, that you had better decisions being made about what was going to find its way to the shelf, the quality of the work that does find its way to the shelf, and so forth. So I think the industry needs a shakeup, a reality check in a lot of ways, kind of the way television has done over the past the past few years. And so that's basically my take. I think there's, but more or less, I'll sum it up by saying there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah. Very.
Does that?
Very interesting. Yeah. Yep. I guess my thought is it's got to be tough if you're Simon and Schuster. I'll just pick one. Do you see people expecting to be able to pay $3 or $4 for an ebook, and or wait for a paperback, and or head to the library to get a free book? I just wonder if the revenue is there to up those salaries for editors. And I am a big time believer in what you're saying in terms of quality developmental editors are worth their weight in gold, the good ones who can dive into your book and help bring it up even further. And the actual copy editors right on down the line. I just went through a process where I had 3 rounds of developmental editing and 3 rounds of copy editing, and it was just phenomenal. It was amazing how much better that improved the book, but that is a commitment in terms of resources on the publisher's end.
And you have to pay enough money to hire the people that are going to know what they're doing. I mean,
right.
You know, if you're gonna pay somebody in New York less than what, you know, McDonald's is paying $20 and up now.
Yeah.
If you're going to pay people, you know, $12 an hour, or $14 an hour, or, you know, whatever pathetic salary it is, and expect quality out of that, you're crazy.
Yeah, you are.
Yep. And that goes to sometimes to some places have reasonably crackerjack marketing operations that provide, you know, good covers and so forth, and some other presses have, you know, just, and I won't name names, but have terrible marketing departments. You wonder, you know, where do they get, where are these people coming from?
Right.
So yeah.
Interesting times. Well, as we wrap up here, I have 2 last questions. One is just, and this, you probably get asked this all the time, but for Rocky Mountain fiction writers, there's usually, last year, I believe, out of 250 or 300 writers that were there, I'm making up numbers, but I do know there were roughly 70 brand new first-time attendees at that conference. In other words, there are lots and lots of people just getting into this business of writing fiction. What is your message to them? They're thinking, oh, here's a big time name. He's been around the block so many times. What is your message to them about approaching a conference, approaching people like you, building relationships? You know, send a message to those new folks coming.
The message I would send, first of all, is to get a membership, subscribe to Publishers Marketplace as soon as possible. I don't know, what is it, $25 or whatever? So pay the money, go join for a month or 2, get on Publishers Marketplace, and use their great search features to search writers that are getting published in your genre, and to learn, first of all, who's in the club, who's selling the most, what imprints are buying your type of writing, and just as importantly, examine the hook lines that Publishers Marketplace includes an exam, and research the high concept stories and the types of stories that are getting published now in your genre, so that you can realize that your real competition are those people, that not the other 250,000 people who don't do what you're doing and don't explore their craft and don't learn enough about writing or about their market, who will never be published. Learn what the people in that rarefied atmosphere are writing and doing, and who they're connecting with. And it takes you a couple days to do it. Well, so be it. I'd look at data going back at least 2 years, and draw some conclusions for that. That's one of the first things I would do, so that you come armed with that knowledge, and then the practical application of it on a day-by-day basis at the conference, as if they're, you know, if you know that you saw in Publishers Marketplace that a particular agent or editor was involved in a deal, a recent deal in your genre, that when you go up to pitch that person, you're going to blow them away when you say, by the way, I decided to pitch you because I just noticed on Publishers Marketplace that you bought and named the title from this agent.
Yep.
And I've got something very similar. And already, just by saying that, you're gonna leapfrog 99% of the other people there, because they're not going to be that cognizant. Show the kind of cognizance that you're showing of what needs to be known before you even talk to a professional. And it's also going to show that you're a professional, that you're more professional as other people. And then next you follow up with a great title, if possible, and go from there into a professional pitch. If you go over to we have a blog called Novel Writing on Edge, and if you go over there, there's a great article on a pitch model that you should be following. I'd recommend checking that out, because if you stick to like a really tight, say 150 word pitch, you're gonna be way ahead of all these other people, and they're gonna take you a lot more seriously. Believe me, they will.
That's great. Well, I will put a link to that in our show notes for sure. And obviously, there's so many rabbit holes we could go down with.
Sure.
You, Michael. I could talk for hours about. We haven't touched on the film business that much, and poetry, etc. But time is time, and we really appreciate your sharing all your thoughts today. We always ask our guests as the last question to kind of wrap up, to just shine a little spotlight on a book or a writer that you'd like to draw more attention to. So now is your chance.
Sure. Well, my choice would be a novel by an author named Melanie Bacon. The novel is entitled Dragon Ripper. And it's a novel about Jack the Ripper's daughter teaming with Sherlock Holmes' sister to fight crime in Old Blighty. And it's extremely atmospheric. Melanie Bacon has read every Sherlock Holmes book ever written, so she knows the territory quite well. And readers love the book. I believe she recently went over 800 ratings and reviews on Amazon.
Wow. Nice.
For her first novel, and she's got a second one that she's going to release. But it's fantastic. Has a beautiful cover, very imaginative, hard hitting. I highly recommend it.
Excellent. Michael Neff, thank you so much for your time. I wish you well, and I know lots of folks are looking forward to meeting you at Colorado Gold in Denver in September. So thank you again.
Thanks so much, Mark. It was great. Thank you.